Come unto me, Jesus says. But his invitation is not for everybody. Listen to the words of Jesus from Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Jesus, in this passage, Jesus says, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." So you see, Jesus' invitation here is not for everyone. He specifically says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavily burdened, and I'll give you rest." So it turns out that for those who are not laboring, Jesus needs them to figure out that they can't do it on their own. Entering into rest really only occurs after our own efforts are exhausted. Even in creation, God did not enter into rest until after he had expended himself in creating all there is. And at that point, then, he enters into a time of rest. If we're in a war or a battle or a game, we're not going to surrender to the other side until we realize that defeat is inevitable. And then we may call Uncle surrender, but only because we realize that we can't do it. We can't win it. We admit our powerlessness only when we become convinced that we can't make it alone. Well, now this is really a good thing, because we all need to labor. We need to be all in. We need to want to do well and to be able to accomplish things on our own without having to ask for help. And it turns out that those who don't try to do it on their own don't really grow. Those who are half-hearted in their efforts never stretch to their full potential. Nevertheless, even when we are fully committed to a change or a project, it is going to fall short without the support of others. If it's an endeavor that is worth our time and bigger than we are, then we need extra help. We need to connect with power beyond our own strength. Now, I see this profoundly in recovery. I work with plenty of people who are ensnared by compulsive behaviors or addictions. And what we find is that we need a higher power. We need something beyond ourselves to get traction, to grow. For success, we must connect with God and with others. And it turns out the most powerful connections come in the face of struggle, from a deep sense of our need and our desperation for help. When we have labored, when we're weary and burdened, then we're really ready for Jesus' invitation. Whenever you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you're ready to see the doctor. You're ready to submit to doctor's orders, ready to give up doing it your own way, and willing to take help and advice from someone else. So Jesus invites us when we're at that place of admitting our powerlessness and feeling burdened and desperate for help, that we come to him. And Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you." Like, cast off the burden that you're carrying and take my burden. Because he says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And because of this, he wants us to learn from him. He wants us to learn the secret and the power of trusting surrender. We only come to believe in God by ceasing to believe in ourselves. This is step 2 of the 12 steps. Step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol or compulsive behaviors, and our lives are unmanageable. Step 2, we came to believe that God could restore us to sanity. And so we become to believe in him by ceasing to believe in ourselves. Now, Jesus on the planet found himself in a world that desperately needed what he had to offer. But even Jesus found that he was powerless to effect change unless faith was activated, unless he was empowered by God to do his work on the planet. And he lived for 9/10 of his time on the planet, to the age of 30, doing relatively little, if anything, to further his mission on the planet. He had to refrain from trying to make things happen on his own and wait on God, trusting that God would empower him at the right time. And we know that when he did get baptized by John the Baptist and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness to be tempted, then he left the wilderness empowered by the Holy Spirit to do what God had him to do. He learned that power comes from submission. And even the baptism, he says to John, this is that all should be established. It is out of an act of obedience that Jesus did what he did. So Jesus finds himself in a world, even after he is empowered by the Holy Spirit, that even the people closest to us sometimes fail to receive from him because of their lack of faith. And Jesus found that even his closest followers were distracted and faithless, and he would cry out from time to time, "O ye of little faith, how long am I going to have to put up with you?" Because he realized that he couldn't drag them into the kingdom. They had to be willing and surrendered in order to come into the fullness of what God had for them. So, as I said, it's imperative that we extend ourselves to accomplish all that we long for and desire. But it's inevitable that we'll find ourselves worn out, exhausted, and unmistakably powerless to do anything without God. However, when we surrender to him, we actually plug into power that makes the yoke easy and the burden light. The Greek word that we translate meek or gentle is prautes, P-R-A-U-E-T-E-S, if you want to spell it in English alphabet. But it's an equestrian term, a term used to apply to horses that's used to describe a horse that has been gentled, or sometimes we use the word broken, to be willing to surrender to the leadership of the groomer or the rider. The word literally means power under control. And it turns out that a horse who has been gentled can do things with the help of a rider that it could not do on its own. It can navigate terrain that otherwise would cause a horse to balk, because if he comes up against a solid wall, for instance, he's not going to jump over. He doesn't know what's on the other side. But if the rider has walked the course in advance, the rider can signal the horse to be obedient to do something that otherwise would be impossible. So it is that when we surrender control to God, we gain control. When we admit our powerlessness, we tap in to power. So if you're listening to this little video and you haven't been convinced that you need help or that you're powerless, you need to try. You need to give it your all. And when people come to our recovery meetings at the church, I tell them, if you still think you can do it on your own, go for it. Give it your all. Because sometimes people think, well, I could do it if I really wanted to. I could quit smoking or drinking or whatever the issue is if I really wanted to. Well, if you're not there yet, get there. Get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Find out the limitations of your own power. And when you find your efforts lacking, then you can hear Jesus' invitation. Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. And you shall find, come unto me, and you shall find rest for your souls. So if you want to find rest, if you want to be relieved of your heaviness, that burden of trying to make things happen and coming up short, then Jesus' invitation is for you, my dear friend. Don't put it off. Don't fail to enter into the rest that's available when you are exhausted, when you're burdened, when you're weary. Jesus says, come to me and I will give you rest. I love you. Please like, subscribe, and follow. I love you.